or die, comply or die, comply.
Welcome to GRC Uncensored, a new podcast designed to elevate real conversations with GRC professionals, auditors, regulators, and those building programs around it. Your hosts Troy Fine and Kendra Cooley, alongside producer Elliot Volkman, guide unfiltered discussions that dig into the reality of how governance, risk, and compliance function, rather than the rose-colored perspective that's fueled by millions in marketing spend. Now, onto your hosts.
Hello and welcome back to GRC Uncensored. I am Elliot Volkman, your producer, alongside Troy Fine. Unfortunately, Kendra is doing something spring break related, hopefully with family, otherwise maybe at a beach with a bunch of those like long drinks. Today, we're going to be talking about something not necessarily, volatile towards the platforms that, we get a lot of feedback on, but instead a generally very important topic that seems to have, I would say, a little bit of mystery around, but if maybe you work for a CPA firm or you've been heavily integrated with a bunch of different firms, you probably have some visibility into this. But for that, we have a special guest, Mr. Jeff Cook, who is currently the principal over at Fortrium, but has around 20 plus years in some capacity being around compliance, and also is the creator and host of I don't want to call it a podcast, it's more of a video series called Business Birdies, where it looks like he gets to go and play on little golf carts. I haven't seen any clips of you running anyone over, so I don't know if that's super appealing, but maybe we will verbally get to that a little bit. So Jeff, did I get that wrong? Did I miss anything in your background? That sounds about right.
Yeah, it's pretty spot on, Elliot. I mean, maybe if I have Troy on the program one day for Business Birdies, we can definitely, see what happens. You never know. But no, I appreciate that. I appreciate the intro and having me on, of course. Yeah, been doing some form or fashion of CPA work for over 20 years. So did a lot of financial audit for a long time before switching over to more SOC-based auditing. So happy to talk about it here, whether it be SOC or anything else, Fortrium related. Troy and I were just talking about some NIST 853 stuff. So whatever comes up, I'm happy to discuss what I can. And let's go for it.
Question,
Right.
do you follow the PGA Tour, Jeff?
You know what? I am not a big watcher of golf, believe it or not. I love to play golf and I love the interaction with people out on the golf course and love being outside and all this other stuff. But watching it on TV, I'm just like,
Well, do you watch the Full Swing on Netflix? Have you watched that series yet? There's a new series anyways. I'm going somewhere with this.
okay, I've seen it.
So this season they have an Australian golfer. I forgot his name. Min Lee, I think is what. Anyway, I forgot his name. But he's very into social media. Like he has got a big brand. And one of his things is that when he goes on the golf course, everyone wears a chef hat and they say, let him cook. So I wonder if people say, do you get people following you to say, let him cook on the golf course? Or, you should follow this guy because you guys, he might follow you back.
I think I need to, for sure. I haven't gotten that yet. Now, if this is the current season guest, then it wouldn't surprise me if in 2025, when I'm out on the course, I'm going to be hearing that, especially from my friends, the ones that I play golf with on a regular basis.
It was recorded in 2024, but it's the new season that started recently. So yes, he played on the Australian Olympic team. So he's like number 25 in the world, but it reminded me, I literally just watched this episode on Sunday. So
Yeah, we tried to do that, the cookout during
there
the
you go. See that?
So it's something similar for sure. And, there's always a little cookout challenge going on, whether it be a putting thing or a longest drive.
I like
or
that.
Closest to the pin. We have a little cookout challenge. So, yeah,
Can you at least wear a chef hat next time you do it?
I might have to.
Yeah,
You always
should.
you need a hook, right? You need something to hook people in. And that's a pretty good idea. I just go play golf in this big, like remember the Swedish chef from the Muppets? You have that guy.
Yeah.
I could even, maybe talk like him or something.
I think you should do it, but I'm happy to play around with you. I'm not very good either, so it'd be a lot of.
You're saying I'm not good?
No, I'm saying I'm not good, but I thought you said you weren't good yourself.
No.
Well, it'd be fun. Yeah, let me know when. I'll try to do DC. I'm in.
No, I'd love it. That'd be great.
What were we supposed to talk about, Elliot? I forgot.
Well, I don't know. I thought we were just going to maybe pivot this over to Topgolf and slam some balls because it's the only form of golf that I know of. But there is an actual important point and focal point for this conversation. which was, I believe, AICPA oversight, which was a little fuzzy because I think in past episodes we've had conversations. Do they actually have any enforcement actions for some of the memos and guidance they provided? And I believe we can narrow that down to one thing. But Jeff, I don't know if you have specific perspective on how that functions, and that might be our short answer.
Yeah. So I will answer things as best I can, right? And there's going to be certain things that are outside of the purview of what I can answer. But then also there's going to be, put it this way too, everything that I'm going to say on here is Jeff Cook, right? I'm not speaking on behalf of the AICPA. I don't work for the AICPA, right? But I will provide Jeff Cook's, insight as to what goes on with oversights and other things too. So really the biggest oversight piece that probably we all know about is peer review. And there's a misconception on peer review though. And that misconception is that it is totally governed and run by the AICPA. What we need to have a little bit of context is that the AICPA is a membership nonprofit organization where CPAs can join, willingly to join them or not. And therefore they are subject to helping their members out. Now, the AICPA has a system for peer review where they can facilitate help facilitate the peer review for you. And that's where I think some of the confusion comes in, because ultimately a CPA firm is registered with a State Board of Accountancy, and the State Board of Accountancy is ultimately what can govern a CPA firm as far as granting a license, revoking a license, things of that nature. So you could, in theory, do peer review without the AICPA by going through the State Board of Accountancy and going through the peer review process that way. So through the AICPA program, what happens is you'll get a CPA firm that'll come out and look at a sample of engagements, let's say for a year period, and they'll determine, was the proper engagement performed under the guidance, the standards, the quality, etc. So they're going to look at things of that nature. You'll get either a pass with deficiency, or basically failure from that peer review. Most firms get pass or pass with deficiency. There are firms occasionally that'll fail. And that's where things start to get escalated to things like the State Board of Accountancy and of that nature when firms fail their peer review. The other thing that happens that maybe not as many people know about is there's what's called enhanced oversight. And that's kind of like, think of it as a next level after peer review is complete. So even let's say if you pass a peer review, your firm may get selected for enhanced oversight. And what does that really mean? That means that the peer review firm is actually also reviewed, meaning they're going to take a deeper look into the engagement that was pulled, or maybe more than one, but typically an engagement that was pulled, and see not only was your peer review accurate, but did the peer reviewer do their job, right? So it's kind of a reviewer of the reviewer, in addition to making sure that the opinion, the pass or pass with deficiency was accurate based on what they're seeing. So that's another thing that's getting some more traction. And then also there's a lot of things that are in progress that we don't see out in the public, but that are being talked about, where I can't say definitively things are going to happen one way or the other, but I could definitely say that there are conversations happening as to what can be done to improve the peer review process. Are there other methods of quality control that can be implemented to figure out if firms are issuing quality reports or not? And the reason I think that all happens, Troy, in the end is ultimately, if you think about the name itself, Certified Public Accountant, we have a duty to the public as CPAs, right? So the quality of these reports is our duty to the public. The public is using these reports. The public is the one who needs these reports for GRC compliance and things of that nature. And I think it's up to us and the organization to make sure the quality is what it needs to be. However, I'm going to also add something to that. I've said this at a couple engagements I've spoke at recently. I would like to challenge the market as well when it comes to this. And what do I mean by that? I mean that it's time for the users of these reports to start speaking up when they see something as well. So if they see a poor quality report, I see it a lot on LinkedIn and other posts where people say, oh, I've seen some garbage reports and I won't put these companies on my white list. I'll make sure I don't use them and things like, okay, so what are we doing about that? We need to figure out where these poor quality reports are and try to improve the rising tide so that all the ships can rise, right? So there's a couple of things that are coming out in that regard. And one of them is something I've worked on personally, chairing the subcommittee for it, was what can be provided to give the report user a better means to review that report for the key information. I'm not saying the entire report is not key, but what I'm saying is there's certain elements in the report that they really need to look at, that they need to know what they're looking at, the exceptions, the opinion, the different components of the system. Is the scope correct? Things of that nature. And what's going to be coming out is not only a checklist that's going to help people review SOC 2 reports, but also a corresponding quick presentation in PowerPoint, which I'm going to record. So that's something that I think is going to help the market to determine better quality of reports. And that's where I challenge the market, because ultimately the market's going to dictate where this goes. So we need to make sure the market is educated to bring up the quality as well as our own, making sure the peer review and things like that is up to speed.
Yeah, no, that I agree with the market point for sure. People will react if the market reacts. That's kind of how this.
I mean, forever, Troy, it always comes back to follow the money, right?
Yes,
Always does. The market's going to dictate a lot of things. So that's where we need to.
The thing with the market, I don't know, and I know that's what the purpose of what you're trying to do is, right? The market, educate the market, but I still don't think that's going to get people to actually like review reports and actually do a detailed dive. I mean, I'm thinking like a big company that has thousands of vendors, that has thousands of SOC reports, right? Like to manually review them and find these things and push back. It's a tall order. And I don't know if the market wants to do that or has the time to do that. I guess, is anything happening where like firms in general are being looked at? Forget about like looking at the quality of the peer review, I guess I'm saying. I guess, is there any movement in saying this firm has a lower reputation, or, like I guess, is there any movement in that direction? Because I think what's happening is firms are clearly abusing, at least in the SOC 2 world, right? I'm not talking about financial audits and everything else the AICPA peer review program covers, but in SOC 2, in my opinion, there's clearly firms that are going below the minimum viable, acceptable product that we should be putting out there. So I'm wondering if the AICPA is aware of this. I know you can't probably divulge details. I'm not asking for anything, too specific, but I guess does anybody know what's going on or care? I guess, because I'll put it that way.
Okay, for sure. The answer to your question is yes. People are very aware of what's going on. And that's where the internal meetings are happening to figure out what are going to be the next steps, what's going to be the plan of action, etc. So yes, they're aware. There are two things, though, in your statement that I've thought about personally that I'm bringing up to try to see, are there avenues to do things like this? And we're discussing it. One, is there a way to do, I don't want to say the organization, but it begins with an H, that does assessments and has a centralized office that reviews everything that comes through them. I don't want to get to that level, but I'm wondering if there is a way to have some sort of quality management center that does review reports, and maybe not every single report, because my guess is there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of SOC 2 reports out there. It would be almost impossible to review every single one, but a sample is reasonable. And then could there be some sort of let's call it a grading system for now on the firms? I'm not saying you disclose the client names or the report itself or anything like that, but to say, okay, Jeff and Fortran issued 500 reports. We sampled 20 and they get a grade of B plus or A minus or whatever it is, or A or B or C, however they want to do it, right? And that way the public can see that and say, okay, I know this firm is an A firm, this firm's a C firm, this firm is failed, or this firm's a D firm, things like that. I would love to see something like that. Again, this is me, right, speaking. The second piece of what you said was very interesting to me, which is the volume for vendor management to not be able to look at that many SOC reports from the vendor management point of view, even if this checklist came out and things of that nature. And I don't disagree with you. The real, in my opinion, of what you're saying, though, the real issue and how we would address that is, would there be a way? I don't want SOC reports to become cookie cutter reports. That's not what I want. But is there a way to make them more, for lack of better terminology, uniform, to where it could be more digestible faster? Because that's my other big thing, Troy, that I've been working on, is I want to trim some of the fat out of these reports. There's a lot of information in these reports, let's be honest, that people, and I don't want to sound too harsh, but people just don't care. Okay. Let's be honest. Do people really care about board of directors minutes? Do they really care about job descriptions? Do they really care about if Johnny signed the code of conduct? They don't care. They want to know, is their data protected when I use this service from this company? That's what they want to know, right? So we need to get to that and trim some of the fat. And in that process, could we make it a little more uniform, maybe even a little more prescriptive, so that it can be reviewed at a faster level? And maybe you're even talking about some form of AI or some form of machine learning that could look at the SOC report and get the key elements of it, because it's a little more prescriptive and uniform, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. As far as like grading firms, though, who would be the we? Who would do the grading, in your opinion?
That's where we would have to discuss, we meaning like the various practitioners, the AICPA. I think this is everybody involved, of what would be the way this could be handled. Does it become, I hate to use FedRAMP PMO as an example, because PMO is a disaster right now, with all the government stuff going on.
The government's a disaster right now? Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
It's quite hard.
That's another podcast. That's another podcast.
Yeah, no, but would there be some sort of program management office that would be able to look at these? And I'm not saying they need to go into the engagements. That's not what I mean. I mean, you can learn a lot just by looking at the report. You know this. A lot of people probably watching this know that. You can learn a lot by just seeing the report and looking at it. So that's what I'm talking about. Is there a submission to a PMO that would review the report, and then on whatever sample they get, maybe it's even quarterly, they're pulling 5 reports quarterly, 10 reports quarterly, whatever it is, and they get a constant grade to see that. So I think it would have to be something created that doesn't currently exist.
So why is the peer review program failing, or not meeting its intended need right now? Because the reason I'm asking is because I know what's out there, and I know peer review doesn't even it's, I guess for people that don't understand, peer review is really just looking at the system of quality control, or I'm not sure exactly the terminology, but they're looking at our firm's way that they oversee quality. I mean, and unfortunately, it's not always quality of testing. In fact, I don't even know if they really look at the testing. And in my opinion, that's kind of been my biggest gripe with it. It's, at least from a SOC 2 perspective, I only want to speak SOC 2 because that's all I can really speak to. But if you're testing certain controls, isn't control testing a big component of quality that isn't being looked at? And in my opinion that's my opinion, is that it's a big miss if they're not looking at it.
Yeah. So it's a great point. And you have some insight here that you're speaking, which is when you do a peer review, you are looking to see that the standards were followed and that testing was performed in accordance with standards, etc. You are correct in that Now, this could be a peer review to peer review case-by-case basis, but in theory, it could be left at, was there testing performed? Yes. Does it look like the testing was performed appropriately? Yes. Did they go any deeper than that? Maybe not. What I think the higher level question is the current way peer review is done, it's still based on financial audits, and then there's attestations, which that's what SOC falls under, attestations. Does it really fit the need for what SOC 2 is, I think is the bigger question, right? Is it the correct format for this type of report? This is a completely different industry than financial auditing. You know what I mean? And even SOC 1, it's a different animal than SOC 1 because SOC 1 ultimately still has financial impact. So this is a different animal than that. And therefore, I think we need to think of new ways outside the box to review it, to accomplish what you're saying, which is ultimately the goal of making sure there's quality in the firms. So I wouldn't say peer review is completely failing, but I would agree that we need to look at non-traditional, maybe new ways of looking at things out there to make sure that the quality is what it needs to be for, again, going back to the good of the public.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. It's built on financial. Well, just like everything else at the AICPA, but that's like the core tax and audit, financial audit. That's what everything's built on. But I mean, I guess ultimately, though, who has to agree to that? So let's say they want to revamp the whole peer review program. Do all the states need to then sit down and also agree to this? Or, I mean, it just seems like it's a lot of bureaucracy that gets in the way too of all
There
this.
is a lot. No, you're right. You're right, because ultimately it comes back to my earlier point, which is this is a membership organization, right? It's not an official authorizing body or government body or anything like that. It's a membership organization when it comes down to it. Now, they have a lot of influence. They write the guidelines and standards and things like that these reports get based on. But ultimately, it's an attestation report that lies with the State Board of Accountancy. So you're right in that even if they came up, let's say if they, everybody loves Jeff's idea of doing this grading system and we want to do it. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you could still go and do a peer review through the State Board of Accountancy, and that's all you're required to do. So it would take,
Exactly.
but that's where I come back to the market. Would the market then say, I need to have a firm that's rated, and up to them what rating they're accepting, C and up, maybe C, ABCs, has to be A, B, or C. That's up to the market. So again, it comes back to, I keep challenging the market to accept what's good versus what's not as well.
Yeah.
So it's going to take, so the thing I always say, Troy, whenever I have all these crazy Jeff Cook ideas and Jeff's brain is cooking them up, or whatever you want to call it.
Just let them cook.
That's
there
right.
you go.
Not the Breaking Bad type, but whenever I'm coming up with these ideas, I always say two things. I go, one, we have to make sure that the market's going to buy it, because ultimately, if the market isn't going to buy into this, it's a waste of our time. Look at the SOC for Cyber report, right? I actually love the SOC for Cybersecurity report. I think it's a very valuable report. Now, do I think some of the fat could be trimmed out of that as well? Absolutely. But I think it's a very valuable report. But it hasn't gotten the market acceptance that they were hoping for. And therefore, what is it? It's really just sitting there on the shelf as something that's collecting dust for the most part. So you have to, number one, make sure that people are going to buy into it before you spend a ton of time doing it. And the other thing is that we have to move faster as an at the organization level of the AICPA and us as practitioners, and when there's feedback requested from public comment and things like that, it has to move faster, because this industry moves so quick that, let's say if they did come out with something new, right? And if it took 2 years even, and that's pretty quick, it's already too late. It's too late. The market's going to move on. Imagine where we'd come in 2 years ago, and where we could be in 2 years in this market, right? So it's got to move faster. So number one, you got to make sure it's there. And number two, you got to move quick to meet the demand. So those are two things that I'm pushing hard to make sure that is being worked on.
Yeah. I know you've been pushing for a while.
But it's starting to get traction now. It's definitely, not that it wasn't before. That's the wrong way to say it's starting, but I'd say it's gaining more momentum now.
Does the AICPA have any, or does the peer review program have any, can they hold GRC tools accountable for anything they're doing? Or is it something that's just kind of out in left field and they can't really do much? Or, I mean, I know they issue guidance on if people are using those tools, service orders are using those tools and how auditors should react or how they should leverage those tools and the questions they should ask and the risks. But is that kind of where their hands are tied there? They can issue guidance and then that's it.
I mean, basically, right? They can issue FAQs and white papers and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately those organizations are private entities. And again, the AICPA is not a government organization or anything like that. So they wouldn't be able to have that type of control over private entities ultimately. So I think you're right in that there can be a lot of information issued. And obviously, if there's things that are violating what CPAs are allowed to do, so when it comes to independence issues and things of that nature, there's a lot of independence and marketing type rules and things like that that need to be followed. That's where they could step in and ultimately, again, comes back to the State Board of Accountancy for CPA licensing, CPA firm licensing, et cetera. So if there were ethical violations or independence violations, then yes, that could be something that could be brought up. But when it comes to just having influence over these private organizations, then not really as much.
Yeah. I figured that was the answer, but I had to ask the question.
Sure.
Do you find it odd that CPA firms find their own peer reviewer and pay them themselves?
Again, this goes back to the answer to your question is yes. And this is one of those things and again, this is Jeff Cook's personal opinion, right? Yes, I think it is odd. And I would prefer if they were assigned peer reviewers. I think it adds another level of separation there that would be better, because this goes back to it's been done that way forever, financial statement audits, and it goes back to that. But if I think about it, it's harder to basically kind of have a buddy system if you were doing bad financial audits. If you're doing bad financial audits, it's not just the peer reviewer that's going to see that. It's the client, it's the banks that are doing the loans and things of that nature. So there's going to be a lot of repercussions if you're doing a bad financial statement audit. Whereas this, it doesn't go to that level quite as much, which is why I think there's a bigger concern when you can pick your own peer reviewer. So again, I go back to my earlier point of the traditional process might need to be tweaked for these type of engagements because they don't quite operate the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you're doing a bad financial audit, then there's fraud or companies doing something wrong, there will be downstream effects. The money, it will come to the service eventually, but with security audits, well, just for lack of a better term, yes, if somebody gets breached, I guess you could tie it back to it and say, hey, you didn't audit good. Look, they had all these holes. But it's so subjective. It's a really hard argument to make from that perspective.
It is. It's a very difficult argument to make because, again, it goes to reasonable, not absolute assurance. And, hey, we did do testing. You might not like the testing we did, but we did do testing. Therefore, we did an audit, that kind of thing. So it would be really hard to make that argument in especially a legal battle if there was one related to a breach,
I have one final question. And it's really important. What is the last thing you asked ChatGPT?
All right. So the last thing I used Claude AI, and I actually asked it to take an article I wrote on LinkedIn about SOC 2 and FedRAMP and convert that into a PowerPoint, which I'm not hopefully going to use PowerPoint, but I needed it for a basis because I want to do a little 2-3 minute recording that we're going to post on LinkedIn. So just repurposing old media into something new and doing it like that. So that was something.
Nice.
So be on the lookout.
Did it do well?
It did a decent job. I mean, I had to do some edits and make sure I made it my own, kind of feel for live rather than a written document. But overall, it did a decent job just to get me started, which I think is, for the most part, what AI is really the best at, is to just get you started. And then you got to kind of take it from there on your own. At least that's what I've always used it for since I've started using it. So
I agree. It's just another tool in the tool belt.
yeah. And then I gotta do a plug, since you called me out.
Go on. Where can people
At AICPA Engage this year, which is the big conference in Vegas that they do, there's a golf event on Sunday that they do for the AICPA Foundation. And this year, they've actually got me doing a live show, Business Birdies, at the event. So I'm going to have a table, and we're going to be doing like drive-by interviews and things like that when people are coming through for the event. So that should be pretty cool to just be set up there. Now I'm kind of sad because I don't get to play, but it will be pretty cool to just kind of do these like 1-minute interviews with people as they're driving by and driving through and seeing how their golf game is going and everything.
That is cool. Make sure you have a lot of water. Might be hot. Just sitting there.
Oh yeah, it gets toasty out there. We're gonna make sure we got a nice little
tent
overhead.
Yeah. If you give people beer, I'm sure they'll come over to you and talk about whatever you want. That's my advice.
Yeah, might have to do some editing too, but that's
by the time Jig's done, he's gonna be. It'll be New Year's Eve for Jeff in June. But anyways, yeah. No, I appreciate you joining the podcast today. It's a good episode. A lot of people have no idea how this works, and they probably are more confused with a little more clarity. But I think it's interesting how the peer review program works and how the states are involved, and I think people just think that every auditor has to follow the same thing, and we have this book that tells us how to go audit this control and do this test, and actually it's very vague and very high level, and that's what you get.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway, Troy, I'd like to have people take from this is, we hear you. We've heard a lot of the practitioners. We've heard the users. We hear what's going on. And again, I don't speak for the AICPA, but the people who are involved hear what's going on, and things are being done, and it's being pushed to do them faster and to do them more accurate. So to answer one of your questions from earlier, yes, it's definitely, there's things happening. It does take a little bit of time, but we're trying to move that clock faster. For sure.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all the work you're doing. I know you do a lot with the AICPA and helping keep us honest over here. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Ultimately, what I really enjoy doing is just talking and helping people and helping out where I can.
Thank you for listening to GRC Uncensored, the podcast, where Troy and Kendra know their shit, and our producer just talks shit. To learn more about GRC, go to grcuncensored.com, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our community on Reddit. Viewpoints expressed during the show do not reflect the brands, employers, or companies of our hosts, guests, or sponsors.
Complexities.